Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. That's the traditional Thelemic greeting. When someone greets you like that, if you're so inclined, you answer them back, love is the law, love under will. Those are sort of the Thelemic greetings and high signs. Formally, Thelemites begin and close letters, at least formal letters that way. But anyway, and we'll discuss why as we continue our read through the Magick of Aleister Crowley. We are finishing up chapter 2, which is the evolution of magical formula, and we've discussed what a universal magical formula is as it relates to human consciousness and human civilization. And we've discussed the last 2 aeons, which Crowley identified for convenience sake, personified them as the gods, the 3 principal gods of Egypt. And we talked about the age of Isis yesterday, or the Aeon of Isis, and the Aeon of Osiris, the previous one that we've just come out of. The magical formula of Osiris is more or less characterized by the idea that the sun dies every day and has to be magically resurrected. And that sort of translated over into personal terms that we think that we die and need to be magically resurrected. And so it's led to the era, a couple thousand years of where that formula was the dominant formula of magic, of religious expression, and of technical religions like Christianity. Today we're talking about the Aeon of Horus, and that's where we're picking up on page 21. The Aeon of Horus, the formula of the crowned and conquering child. As the child is the physical and genetic product of both its parents, so too the Aeon of Horus reconciles and transcends the formulae of the 2 previous aeons. Since the turn of the century, and when I wrote this, it was still the 20th century, since the turn of from the 19th to the 20th century anyway, since the turn of the century, we've seen the fall of colonialism, the destruction of the last vestiges of the overtly patriarchal rule of the kings in Europe. Temporal power of the Pope is gone. The illusion of the omnipotent spiritual power of the Church has become diluted beyond hope of revival. The Earth Mother worshipping formula of the Aeon of Isis 2 aeons ago, violently repressed during the Aeon of Osiris, has been transformed by the evolution of our consciousness and resurrected as the Earth respecting environmental movement, the woman's movement, and the resurgence of the cult of the goddess. These developments are seen by the established institution as blasphemous examples of spiritual and unholy degeneration of humanity. They grossly misinterpret their own scriptures to warn of an inevitable cleansing conflagration that will reestablish an even greater Osirian rule. While a certain amount of conflict probably is inevitable, as it is at the beginning of every age, the result most certainly will not be a return to the formulae of the past. Standing as we are upon the threshold of the Aeon of Horus, what we observe happening in the world is rather unsettling. But it is the natural result of the vested interests of the old Aeon, resisting the establishment of the new. It's very much like the strife families experience when a child grows up and finally leaves home. Eventually, the parents accept the inevitable and, in most cases, form a new and supportive relationship with the child. We are the child who has just become self-aware. We still love our mother and father, but we know we will never be happy as long as we exist only as an extension of their lives. Now that we are conscious of the continuity of existence, now that we perceive the universe as a process of continual growth, now that we recognize the individual as the basic unit of society, we will never return to the flawed and incomplete perceptions of the past. And I know that's too short to stop today, so we will start on chapter 3, which is about the Book of the Law. Isn't that a beautiful edition? At the time, this was the presentation edition of the Book of the Law for initiates of the OTO. It has the text in front, and then it has the entire facsimile, handwritten facsimile in Crowley's own handwritings in the back. That's a photograph of the actual page. It's a beautiful little edition. I don't know if we are still, if that's still being handed out upon a person's initiation, but whoever got them, they were lucky to get that. I'm going to read something at the very end, and I'm using it here as the epigram for this chapter 3. And it says, "Do what thou wilt," the comment, "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. The study of this book is forbidden. It is wise to destroy this copy after the first reading. Whoso disregards this does so at their own risk and peril. These are most dire. Those who discuss the contents of this book are to be shunned by all as centers of pestilence. All questions of the law are to be decided only by appeal to my writings, each for himself. There is no law beyond do what thou wilt. Love is the law, love under will, the priest of the princes, Ankh Efen Kansu. Sometimes it's written out, Ankh Af Na Kansu. So, now when I first read that, I had a book of the law that looks something like, maybe I have it around here somewhere. Here it is. I read that in this particular edition right there, the little blue edition. It was printed in Dublin, California, privately printed in 1974. I got it from England, as a matter of fact. I think a friend of mine was in the Atlantis bookstore. And I said, if you find anything by Aleister Crowley, get it for me. And he brought back this. So it was probably in 1974, just a year before I would be initiated into the OTO. When I read that comment in this book, I burned it. There's a YouTube video of a documentary I did, a Canadian documentary, where I tell this story and they sort of reenact it. It's very funny. A year later, when I took my Minerval initiation in Dublin, California, I received an exact duplicate of the book that I had just burned a year ago. It was almost like it resurrected, came back from the ashes. But anyway, that's I digress. Sorry. The above statement that I just read, the above comment in Class A appears at the end of all authorized editions of the Book of the Law, and is an ominous warning to those who would presume to define or interpret the contents of the primary holy book of Thelema. In preparing the present work for publication, I have endeavored to the best of my ability to abide by the above injunction, while at the same time providing a sufficient amount of information to enable the reader to begin his or her own line of exploration. This is a bit like walking a tightrope. I confess that I'm not a high initiate, nor am I an exemplary specimen of the ideal Thelemite. The reader is honor-bound to disregard anything I say if it appears that I have overstepped my bounds in this regard. It is impossible to understand the rituals of Thelema without a basic familiarity with Liber Al Vel Legis, the Book of the Law. It would be unfair to the owners of this handbook if we did not include it in its entirety. And it's all in here. All 3 little chapters. We're going to read them. The deities and the magical formulae revealed in this small volume are the very essence of the Aeon of Horus. Details of how this unique book came into being are outlined in Crowley's Equinox of the Gods, the Temple of Solomon the King, and a number of other recent publications which the reader is encouraged to research. To help put things in historical perspective, I offer the following brief review of the events that surrounded the reception of the Book of the Law. In 1903, Crowley had all but suspended magical workings and had taken his new wife, Rose, on an extended honeymoon to a score of exotic locations, including Ceylon and Egypt. In December, they discovered Rose was pregnant. Rather than returning to their cold home in Scotland, they chose to travel back to Cairo, where the weather was pleasant. Assuming romantic identities, they checked into their hotel apartments as Prince Kio Khan, Chiokhan, Kio Khan, which means beast, and Princess Urada, which means rose. And they settled in. I'm not sure they fooled anybody, but it was so cute that they did that. They would go shopping, and they would hire a guy, a big black guy. They'd hire him, and they'd put him in sort of an oriental diaper and a turban, and they'd oil him all up and make him run in front of their carriage and go, make way for Prince Keokan and Princess Urada, maintaining a low profile here in Cairo. So, you gotta love Crowley. Okay, But I digress. Perhaps out of boredom, Crowley performed the preliminary invocation of the Goetia, purporting to show Rose the sylphs. It must be remembered that Rose had no training or interest in magic. She did not see the sylphs, but instead fell into a, quote, strange state of mind, unquote. She began repeating, as if in a trance, quote, "They're waiting for you. It's all about the child. All Osiris," unquote. She then informed her husband that the god Horus was angry with him for ignoring him. Irritated by what he at first thought was Rose's childish behavior, Crowley began to interrogate her as to the technical attributes of this god. And if anyone knew the details, it was Crowley. To his great surprise, Rose, who had absolutely no knowledge of Egyptology or magic, answered even the most technical and esoteric questions with 100% accuracy. The next day, they visited Cairo's Bulaq Museum. It was Crowley's intention that Rose point out this god who wanted to talk to him. He sniggered as she ignored and passed by the most common images of Horus, but he was quite surprised when she excitedly identified an obscure wooden funeral stele of the 25th dynasty as the source of her communications. And it looks sort of like that. Even more stunning was the museum exhibit number 666. Crowley could not ignore this curious chain of events. He had the stele reproduced and began systematically working with Rose as his magical assistant. And so there's the front, right in the book here. Don't have the stele? Oh, get the book. There's the back of the stele. Space forbids us to detail what followed. The reader is again referred to the previous mentioned text. Suffice to say that Rose's unexpected mediumship contact was established with a praetor-human intelligence calling itself Aiwas, a messenger of Hurpar Krat, who announced the equinox of the gods, or the changing of the age, and the intention of the gods to use Crowley to receive a book that was to be the fundamental revelation of the new age. On March 20th, 1904, Crowley performed the supreme invocation of Horus, which formally initiated the Aeon of Horus. Per instructions, between noon and 1 o'clock on April 8th, 9th, and 10th, he entered the same temple, sat down at a writing table, and wrote what was dictated to him by an audible voice. The results of these 3 hours of dictation are the 3 chapters of the Book of the Law. The reader is neither asked nor expected to believe this story. Each must judge for himself the value of the book. As I mentioned earlier, it is a fundamental proscription of the text to offer to interpret or even discuss the Book of the Law. It's entirely up to each of us to fathom its meaning in relationship to our own individual lives. And that's where we will stop today. I've got a note here that says the reader will notice that Liber Alvel Legis the Book of the Law, is designated as a publication in Class A. Crowley originally categorized the works which are official publications of the AA into 4 classifications. Class A consists of books that may be changed not so much as the style of a letter. That is, they represent the utterance of an adept entirely beyond the criticism of even the visible head of the organization. The Class A documents are received documents. Crowley doesn't even claim that he wrote it. He received it. He somehow channeled it. Class B consists of books or essays that are the result of ordinary scholarship, enlightened and earnest. And Class C consists of matter that's to be regarded rather as suggestive rather than anything else. And Class D consists of official rituals and instructions. Some of the publications are composite and pertain to more than one class. The Thelemic rituals, which are the subject of this book, are in Class D. Okay, tomorrow I actually print out and give us all 3 chapters of the Book of the Law. And with your kind permission, tomorrow we will read chapter 1. It's about the time of year to do things like that, isn't it? Anyway, continue on. And if you have forgotten what we're reading the Magick of Aleister Crowley, Handbook of the Rituals of Thelema from Wiser Books. And that's that. Got to finish up our Thursday chores. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love's the law, love under will. See you tomorrow.